The search for the natural God. If I were a natural Theonaut, I would say that my primary search is for the real God. Because the word Theonaut means a navigator in search of the one true and natural God, not the one born of human bureaucracy. This relates to salvation, and when we say salvation, we mean natural salvation. We know that whoever seeks salvation exclusively will lose it. This is the paradox of the search for salvation, enlightenment, or transcendence. When salvation becomes the sole selfish goal, it becomes unattainable. But if we live in the mode of being and not having, that is, if we seek to evolve, to be wiser, more fulfilled, if we seek the truth and not deceive ourselves, true fulfillment or salvation would be an addition, a byproduct of living a virtuous, decent life. If you live trying to be better, as if salvation didn't matter, you will obtain salvation. The desire to earn salvation is a way of trying to gain something external, like winning a car. But what truly happens is that salvation isn't about gaining something. It's about transforming one's very being. It's an alchemy. The literal quote from Jesus in Matthew 16 verse 25. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. This becomes clear when we consider that the best model for being a fulfilled human being is to be like Jesus. We've already mentioned that attachments to this world, primarily the culture of self-indulgence, are an anchor that prevents us from transcending. The idea is that attachment to desire, even the desire for nirvana, which would be the equivalent of Buddhist salvation, prevents us from reaching enlightenment. Even existentialist thinkers like Soren Kierkegaard address the idea that happiness or truth isn't found by directly seeking it, but by living life with purpose, and happiness is found as a result. Kierkegaard explored the idea that happiness and truth are not objects that can be obtained through a direct and objective search. He argued that the true meaning of existence lies in subjectivity, in personal commitment, and in the passionate experience of one's own life. And when we refer to our own lives, we are not referring to the goals of the genius of the species, for which we are merely a tool, but to ourselves. This is why self-knowledge is so important. Therefore, salvation is primarily our own affair, our responsibility. We know that in many religions, God makes a promise of salvation if one follows his laws or directives. But what superior being would make promises? Promises are made by politicians, by those who wish to gain benefits without giving anything in return in the present. The promise is used as a law or bait to attract, persuade, or induce someone to perform an action, often with an element of deception or with the intention of changing the initial conditions later. And many politicians, as we've seen lately, come to power and don't keep a single one of their promises. Why would God use bait to lure people in? If someone falls for the promises, it's because they want to obtain what the promise says, not because they want to improve themselves. Losing salvation by believing the promises is automatic, because the individual is seeking something unrelated to their own evolution, because they're only trying to ingratiate themselves with the being who makes promises of eternity. At an age over 65, reality knocks at the door. We want to continue existing, and we also know from experience that human culture is riddled with deception, so I have to tread carefully. I don't ask myself whether God exists or not. That doesn't interest me, and he certainly doesn't care that I do. What I desperately want is for a superior being, someone decent, pure, and without lies, to exist. Because that gives me hope that decency and honesty can exist in a human being. I want to continue existing, but without the flaws of my human species. I want to continue existing in the best expression of myself, in the pleroma. Whether God exists or not is irrelevant to natural salvation. Since, if salvation is possible, only those who have built themselves up well in a healthy way, without suffering from ontopenia, will continue to exist. And my desire for God to exist makes me think that, if he truly exists, he must be hidden, intentionally. Because only those who attune themselves to the good place, to something very similar to it, will reach the good place, to the utopus. It is not impossible that degenerate beings suffering from ontopenia can reach that good place. We already explained this before. There's no need to repeat it. We say that God does not reveal himself, and this is intentional, because it provokes an inner calling, a search. By not revealing itself, It avoids the comfort of obviousness. But this emptiness is a space of gestation. Only when God hides is humanity forced to search within itself for what is most important. Divine concealment is, in this sense, a pedagogy of being. Heidegger would say that concealment belongs to the very way in which being gives itself. Being withdraws to make room for appearing. To find it and appear within us, making us better. When the divine withdraws, it opens space for human freedom, to seek what may be decent, beautiful, and harmonious. It opens the possibility of heuristics, to seek and discover through one's own merit. Because God is revealed through merit, not revelation. Revelation is for the parasitic and the lazy. And if there is a God, it would value personal merit more, because the subject strove to find it, because they greatly desired its presence. And I truly wish that it exists. I pray that a decent being exists amidst this maelstrom of the horde. Because it cannot be that these conscious beings who live off war, deceit, and exploitation are the only conscious beings in the universe. Truly, I need a good being to exist. But in its goodness, it wouldn't give us the answers to the test. It would never offer revelations. We would have to find it within ourselves. The silence of God expands the field of ontological freedom. If God exists and reveals himself, then essence would precede existence, and we would already be predefined. Zero freedoms. Only biological mechanisms. Consciousness as an epiphenomenon of the ectoderm that does not seek to transcend. But, as Sartre says, if God does not exist, we would say that he is not present. Then existence precedes essence. Without an essence given by a creator, each individual must invent their own essence through reflection and actions. There is no human nature predefined by a god or by the self-indulgent genius of the species. We create ourselves. This is a form of condemnation. Man cannot stop choosing. He cannot take refuge in a destiny defined by Dasein, or in a supposed divine will that grants us authority. I must be a Theonaut, heuristically seeking God. I would say it's an excellent way to spend the time we have left. The absence of God is, therefore, the ontological condition of freedom. Because since he is not present, there is no dogma on his part, and dogmas have only been given until now by power-seeking elites. Dogma is heteronymous. One is subject to an external power that prevents the development of one's true nature. Therefore, it is impossible for God to reveal dogmas. There are none from him, since the opposite of heteronymous is autonomous. Surely, if God exists, he waits for those who truly need or love him, or see him as a yearning or goal. Surely, if God existed, he would expect intelligent beings to be seeking him. Individuals who don't believe, but know, who don't have faith, but seek, who don't wait for promises, but will obtain what they desire, that is, the fullness of God, or whatever most closely resembles it. God's hiddenness implies freedom as a maturation of the spirit. Overall, God's concealment represents an evolutionary stage of collective consciousness. As Heidegger would say, it is the opening of being. As Jung would say, internalization of the symbol. As Sartre would say, self-constitution of existence. By concealing himself, God causes humanity to cultivate its being and to know itself. And in the end, he will surely say, I know you. And he wouldn't say, as in Matthew 7 verse 23, I never knew you, depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. The Supreme Being expects the very best in the utopian world. No to the credulous or the mythophiles. The miscellaneous gods that culture has offered us for thousands of years only condemn our souls. The God we seek is not the one they offer us. Not a God who seeks to be worshipped because he doesn't need it, for applause and veneration are merely signs of human weakness. He has never presented himself to give principles or rules for human beings to live by. Rather, he waits for people to find decency and righteousness within themselves, that is part of the process of self-knowledge. He doesn't need us to believe in him, for the most important thing is not faith, but self-transformation. A decent God would look favorably upon human effort to improve, not blind obedience to a faith, and living in complete ignorance by believing any imbecile. That being does not appear in the cultural pantheon. The word pantheon comes from Greek and means all the gods. The God we seek is more beautiful and pure, and nameless. Because only the elements that make up a horde need names to distinguish them from one another. But God is unique. There is no need to distinguish him from others. He needs no name. So we seek an unknown being, one who fulfills our longings for decency, beauty, and wholeness. To distinguish him from the pantheon of the horde, we will call him the agnostos theos, which comes from ancient Greek and means the unknown God. It comes from a privative prefix meaning without or not, and nostos, an adjective meaning known, and theos, God. In ancient Greece, nameless altars were built, dedicated to this unknown God. In ancient Egypt, the unknown God is Amun, which means the hidden one, and referred to an Egyptian god whose true name and essence were unknown, so he was often associated with the mysterious and unknown. He was considered the god of air and wind, and his very name alludes to his invisible and unknown nature. During the New Kingdom, he merged with the sun god Ra to become Amun-Ra, the supreme god of Egypt. The Maya had the idea of an unknown god, who was Hunab-Ku, the supreme and incorporeal creator god, who had no physical representation. In the Mayan language, Hunab means one or unique, and Ku means god, temple, or bird's nest. The idea has been in the air for thousands of years. And yes, the God we yearn for and seek, the one not found in the pantheon of 21st century culture, is the unknown God. He is a hidden God, a kryptos theos, from the Greek krypto, hidden, or eratos theos, or invisible God. The word heratos means visible. Be a theonaut in silence, to aid our transformation or alchemy of being. We sail in search of God, eratos theos, Hunab-Ku, Amun, agnostos theos, but in reality, that wondrous being has no name. Life is defined by the impulse to search within ourselves. It closely resembles the non-canonical Gospel of Thomas. The Theonaut's journey is ontological. It is a displacement of the being toward the source of being. God hides himself, for pedagogical reasons. He doesn't appear because his function is not to solve problems, but to help humanity grow. God's silence would be an ontological stimulus for learning about ourselves. Here, divinity reveals itself through inner maturation. The search becomes the only path to revelation. Sartre said that the absence of God is not a tragedy, but a possibility. If God does not exist, humanity is alone, but also free. Without a pre-existing model, one must invent oneself. The Theonaut says, if God exists, his silence and concealment serve the same function. They compel us to invent ourselves, to become co-creators of meaning. Faith and belief, which are essentially not knowing, kill heuristics, the search for the kryptos theos. Having faith or belief is a clear indicator of poor human quality. It tells us how great our capacity is to deceive ourselves, to be unclear, and to not seek clarity. With faith and belief, the one true God will remain unknown, and we will never find him within ourselves. The silence of God is the ultimate lesson of being. It teaches us that revelation does not occur through appearance, but through transformation. That spiritual maturity consists of embracing not knowing as a mode of openness. The Theonaut does not seek proof or miracles, but ways to inhabit the mystery with dignity. This is the purpose of divine concealment, that humanity, by not finding God outside itself, learns to become the space where being can to reveal itself. The non-canonical Gospel of Thomas says, I am the light that is above all things. I am everything. From me everything came, and to me everything came. Cut a piece of wood and there I am. Lift the stone, and there you will find me. This passage illustrates that God is present everywhere in nature, even within us. Stone temples are unnecessary. We are the temple. And so, the voyage of the Theonaut does not lead to the pleroma of divinity, but to the transformation of humankind into a being worthy of it. If something persists after death, a form of consciousness, a trace of being, that continuity would not be automatic or universal, but rather tuned according to the acquired ontological quality. The soul would resonate only with that which is of its own stature. And if a superior being exists, pure, decent, it would not judge it, but would recognize it through a sympathetic vibration, tuning in through resonance. So, kind reader, you who are surely over 65, can achieve a well-constructed being, since we are not born with a soul, but rather we create it. Salvation is like the liberation of the soul from this material existence to inhabit the utopus. In this context, the knowledge of the final destiny or of the rescatos, final events, the end of the world, the afterlife, including the God within us, are a product of self-knowledge, which prevents suffering from ontopenia. May you have an interesting journey in the final stretch. Remember that what truly matters is honesty, sincerity, purity, and the beauty of a well-constructed soul. Salvation is a natural consequence. Thank you for listening.